Hey friends, welcome to episode 4 of Unstuck It, the podcast for women who've outgrown the life they were told they should want and are ready to get unstuck and build something new. Today's guest is someone who is the definition of reinvention. She has walked through transformation herself and now empowers other women to do the same. Tymeka Whiteside is a board-certified coach with specialty designations in life, personal, leadership, executive, and corporate coaching. She is the founder and CEO of Behold, a dynamic organization offering strategic coaching, budget-conscious consulting, and community impact. She also is the founder and executive director of a nonprofit, Bridging the Gap Community Enrichment. From major life pivots to deep personal clarity, Tymeka is here to talk about what she calls the process of identifying me and how sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is slow down. Welcome, Tymeka.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for joining. So, first question, Tymeka, you've lived so many lives professionally: counselor, strategist, CEO, nonprofit founder. But underneath all of that is this powerful concept, the process of identifying me. Can you share what that means to you and why it's so essential, especially for women in their 30s and beyond?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. As women, we get to a pretty significant pivot in our lives when we're about 30 years old. And of course, it goes beyond that. But many of us start to ideate around age 30 of what our life should look like, where we're going to go from this point. And unfortunately, what happens at that stage is that we see some things in a very glared light, which causes us to have many challenges that show up internally, mentally, emotionally. And then the looming question starts to rise of, who am I? So I think one of those areas is really trying to pivot to figure out moving from college age into real quote unquote adulthood and really saying, okay, who am I? What should I be doing? Moving into that space of rediscovering yourself, which is an ongoing thing. I'm thinking about, okay, I've done all of these things. I've checked the box, but I still don't know where I'm going from here, what I should be doing, and doing the right things. It still just doesn't feel like it's enough, and it's overwhelming. And sometimes it becomes demoralizing and even demotivating, especially when we're looking at a world of social media.
That's a really good point. And so you talk a little bit around kind of tapping into that piece around identifying me. Is there a process by which somebody can do that, or what does that look like?
Absolutely. So finding your identity comes with challenges, and it continues through the different stages of life. There's this peer pressure, and it's not just a childhood thing. Like I said before, we're in a world of social media. So identifying yourself, if not careful, we start to compare ourselves versus identifying who we are. So we're looking at all of the beautiful people on social media, and then we look at ourselves and we're thinking, oh, they have perfect skin, they have perfect hair, they have a perfect life, all of the different things. And then we look at ourselves and we're thinking, I'm a mess, I'm a wreck, I don't have this and I don't have that. And so we start to diminish who we are based on what we see versus looking from within to identify who we really are. And it's really in those quiet moments that we really sit with that and start to identify who we are. You know, life in our 30s is like that new time of reflection. It's the time of not looking around at others and comparing ourselves, but it's a cycle that happens in every systemic stage. So you'll see it happening in our 30s, in our 40s, in our 50s, in our 60s. It's almost like every 10 years, we have to go through this process when in reality, what we need to do is take a moment and slow down and really sit with our thoughts and our feelings and assess what our goals are. Our goals at 30 are not going to be the same goals at 50. And so we have to sit with that. And so it's a process to slow down because we have to prepare for what's coming around the corner. I typically look at that from a perspective if you're driving on the highway. You may see the speed limit at 70, and if you're like some of us, you're going 75, but you need to get off at your exit. And if you notice, those exit signs are going to show you to slow down to 35, 25. If we look at life the same way, we'll realize, hey, it's about time to exit. We have to slow down in order to speed up. If you're going to take that exit at 70, 75 miles per hour, you're running a risk of crashing. I've seen that happen many times, literally in vehicles, but that's also what I see happening in our lives. We just don't take the time to slow down and really assess where we need to get off in order to get back on to reach our destination.
That's a really good point too. And, just kind of going back even just to the social media piece, thinking about the fact that we're really only looking at the highlight reels of everybody's life in social media. And when we need to take that moment and slow down and pause and look at ourselves, we cannot take those highlight reels. That's like looking at somebody's vacation pictures and assuming that's their whole life, right? You have to pause and say, what is it that really matters to me and my day to day? And like you
Absolutely.
said, that's really slowing down to speed up. And that feels very counter to this kind of hustle mindset that we're living in today, that we're
Yes.
seeing everybody go, 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 go. So, in real life, what does it look like to slow down to speed up?
Great question. So it really is a strategy. And I think, as you mentioned, this hustle mindset, we are so conditioned that we should always have something going on. We should always be in motion. We should always have an expectation of planning for the next. And we cannot use that as a strategy. That is not a good strategy for success. However, sometimes we look at slowing down as a weakness, but the reality is that is your settling down in order to prepare. You cannot run the race if you don't pace yourself. So slowing down really looks like, how do I pace myself? My pace is going to look different from someone else's pace. So moving away from looking at all of the externalities and looking from within. If you look at how strategy happens, it requires us to make pivots. It requires us to realign. It requires us to make adjustments. And if we are so busy being in motion at the same speed, how will we ever recognize that something is going off the rail in order for us to still meet our goals and reach that destination? So sometimes we think about the quietness of it. And I think sometimes people fret being quiet because they have to sit with the realities of what might not be going so well. Well, if you sit with that and you sit in that as a strategy for your success, you will realize that you will save yourself a lot of time from getting all the way down the road. Again, using the car analogy, have you ever missed your exit? And you
Yes.
think, I'll just go up to the next exit and turn around. But you're in some places and you realize the next exit is 5 miles versus a half a mile. So that's how we have to look at life when it comes to slowing down, paying attention to what's going on. And not only that, we have to make sure that we are healthy all the way around if we're going to reach those goals. So slowing down is not that weak point, but it is that point to replenish and to reassess and to make any pivots.
Yeah, and that, the slowing down piece, you made a point earlier that you can't stop to think about some of those long-term strategic pieces if you're constantly going. And there really is a benefit in saying, okay, I'm going to stop for a minute and use this time to brainstorm, to plan, to evaluate. And when you're constantly dealing with input by going, 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 you can't do that process piece. So it's a really good point that the slowing down is really in the interest of the long term of speeding up so that you don't miss your exit and then have to come back around and in 5
Absolutely.
years in some case turn things around, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you watch a basketball game and you see the person coming down the court with the ball and they're dribbling and they are driving and then they suddenly stop. I mean, they literally come to a complete stop. They're still dribbling, but they've come to a complete stop. It is because they're looking at what strategy is being set up. They're
Mhm.
looking to see where exactly their teammates are, or is this my opportunity to take a successful shot? And so the game doesn't stop just because they are not running or walking and their feet aren't moving forward, but there is a strategy. Again, that's the same thing. And if you notice when they stop, sometimes even when they stop to dribble and they grab the ball, they pivot
Mm.
in order to pass the ball to the person who is going to help them be successful. That's the same thing in life. We're not stopping, we're slowing down because we're assessing where all of the key players are to get us to that goal.
Yeah, that's a good point of, there are also individuals around us that are our key players. So
Yes,
being mindful in our planning that they're part of that. And
absolutely.
so many, many women in our audience right now are in transition, thinking about going to transition to new jobs. They may have lost their job. It may be a relationship shift or just a new chapter. So, what would you say to those women who maybe are afraid of that pivot, of that slowdown, of that having to sit with that discomfort?
I cannot emphasize enough. Pivots are necessary, and I cannot emphasize that enough. Pivots are necessary because they help us make the necessary turns that we need to make. Just as I mentioned before, if you're coming down the court and you're coming down the court of your life, if you don't make a pivot, you may find yourself running into a brick wall. It's no different than when we're driving. We see the sign that says dead end, no outlet. We have to pivot from the direction we thought we were going to go in order to reach the destination. So when you think about the transition from new jobs or career changes or relationships shifts, whatever the case may be, we have to embrace that pivot because it's putting us into the new chapter of life. And understand you can't get a chapter without going page by page. A
And
pivot is simply turning the page.
yeah, and that's what I was gonna say is your pivot is your next page. Or like I really love that dead end point that you made. That imagine that you're at a point where that's just where the story stops now. It's time to turn the page or it's time to pivot and make a turn on the road. If you don't, you're just staying put and you're never going to get to the end of the story or the destination you were going to. I think that's an amazing analogy.
Absolutely. Even if I think about this a little bit, I am originally from Western North Carolina and the huge impact from Hurricane Helene. Now, I've been living in the Triangle for over 30 years. However, when I go home, I pretty much take the same route. However, when the hurricane hit, there were so many roads that were washed out, destroyed, impassable, all of the things. And so when I got ready to go home, in my mind, I was going to go the exact same pathway. But when I came to the barricades in the road that said stop, I didn't just sit there. I had to make a pivot and I had to make some adjustments to go around in safe passageways to get to where I was going. Again, I think about that because we think, oh my gosh, if I don't go the pathway I had planned, then this is a failure. No, it's a failure when you reach that roadblock and you stop and you give up and then you turn around and go back from where you came from. So again, I can't emphasize enough how much it's important to be okay with pivots because they're necessary.
And to bring us back even to the basketball analogy, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. If you don't choose to make that pivot, it is the same as not taking a shot, and you will
Mhm.
not get that result at the end that you're looking for. So I think that's
Absolutely.
just so true that, and the point you make around we look at things as though they are a failure instead of
Mhm.
just a block in the road. It's not necessarily your failure that the block showed up in the road or that something changed, that you changed, right? We also often start off, if we're talking about careers, we also start off on a path that a lot of times people just tell us what direction we should go because we're
Yes.
learning and growing and we go down some direction that, oh, everybody's successful in X field. Go do that.
Mhm.
And you get there and you're like, I actually hate this job. You do all the
Yes.
things you were supposed to do. And then you
Yes.
realize it's not a fit for you. And that's not a failure. It's acknowledging that it's time for a pivot and it's
Mhm.
time for something different.
Absolutely. And I think a point that I'd like to make on that is that when we get to that point, that is our opportunity for reinvention or recalibration within ourselves. And we can do that over and over and over and over and over again. I can't emphasize that enough because when we get to that point where, hey, I hate this job, that's just an opportunity for reinvention. It allows us to be the chameleons that we want to be, because everybody's path is not going to be the same thing. We're not going to get the same outcomes. We go in with some similar expectations, but we don't always end up with the same outcomes that we thought we were going to get. So, recalibration is also another thing that we have to give consideration to each and every time that we need to pivot. I think about that and I laugh because recalibration is something that's huge when it comes to a scale for me because, we get on a scale and we're like, okay, I know I've lost 5 pounds. And then we look and we've gained a half a pound and we're like, nope, this can't be right. But even if you go to the doctor's office, what do? They actually recalibrate their scales. We have to recalibrate our lives, our pathways, our journeys to make sure that it is in proper alignment. Something could have happened where you dropped a bottle of lotion and it caused the calibration to be out. We recalibrate the tires on our vehicles. So all of these realignments, if we're doing that for our vehicles, why aren't we doing those things for our lives? It's okay. It's necessary because again, what we go into a scenario thinking is going to be the outcome, that's not always the case. And another big point to consider is that there are externalities of us. So just because we think it's going to go this perfect way, the way that we planned it is very difficult to factor in every single externality that may cause a shift in that pathway and that journey. So expect it and embrace it.
Yeah. And for when you coach women who are trying to prepare for that next step, that pivot for what's around the corner,
Mhm.
even if they can't fully see it yet, if there's someone listening today or someone that you're working with, what is something that you would tell them that they can start doing today to start preparing for that pivot, to start thinking about how to prepare for that thing around the corner?
So, preparing for that, and this is something that I see often, is that preparation is often thwarted by fear. Fear will creep in and it is not at all beneficial to the process. Fear is something that just shows up uninvited, unexpected. But in order to start preparing, I think it's important to say, let me really sit with my real feelings. I am afraid. I've been doing this job for X number of years. I've been in this relationship for X number of years. I've invested this amount of time into this. And what if? And it's that key thing right there. What if? Fear is tied to the what if. I would say in the preparation, address your fears, understand what is the foundation of that fear. A lot of times, people will have fear based on the unknown, or there is fear because they may see someone else do it and it seems like they do it so seamlessly, and there is a tremble in their confidence to feel like they can do it as well. And that can even evolve into true imposter syndrome. But in order to prepare, the first thing has to happen is doing a self check in. What
Mhm.
am I dealing with? What am I facing? Am I thinking about the unknown? Am I thinking about the fears? Am I thinking about failure? Am I thinking about what I have to give up in order for me to do this? Once you start to address those things now, start to look at the successes. And I even tell my clients, get two pieces of paper. And if possible, if it's the same color paper, use two different colors of writing instruments. Have one page that you're writing down everything that is negative. I'm not sure if I can do this. What's going to happen? I saw this person do it and they failed. Write all of that down and really sit with it, because this is what you're pouring out of yourself. But on the other paper, I have them write down the what ifs of success, because we always want to elevate the what ifs of failure versus elevating the what ifs of success. Once they have their list together, then I tell them, take the what ifs of failure and get rid of it, shred it, tear it up. If you've got a fire pit, toss it into the fire and destroy it. It's kind of symbolic because it allows you to get out all of the angst, if you will. But now you are placing all of your what ifs of success in a place that you're able to see. And so now they're looking at it. And I even have some clients take it a step further where they take that full list and turn those into sticky notes. Put a couple of them on your mirror while you're putting on your makeup, while you're doing your hair, and you're looking and you're saying, hey, yeah, what if I'm successful? Hey, yeah, what if this brings in the outcome that I'm really looking for? Hey, what if I accomplish this in a shorter period of time that I thought it was going to take? What if this turns into something even bigger than what I expected? And once that starts to get in and starts to resonate, there's a whole mindset that shifts. It is a mindset that shifts us into positivity, into success. It becomes an affirmation. Really and truly, it's a daily affirmation. As weird as it may sound, if you drive, put a couple of them on your steering wheel so that when you get into your vehicle, it's boom, right in your face. And that's how
Yeah.
you start to prepare. You are preparing yourself. And the other thing that I actually think about when it comes to preparing is to look at it as an opportunity, not as starting over from ground zero, but it is an opportunity to go into a new phase with more experience.
That's a good point, that you're bringing those skills that you already have and you're not
hmm
starting from scratch.
Exactly. Exactly. You're not coming in completely green, no pun intended, with the green shirt on, but you're coming in with the idea of, the last time I started a new project, I went in with this mindset. What I learned from that is I have to pace myself. So now, as I start this new project, I am being very intentional. I'm very strategic on pacing myself. I recognized the areas that I needed to slow down in order to speed up. I recognized the areas that I had roadblocks. And so I had to have a game plan on how I was going to pivot to keep moving forward. So those are areas that I would suggest in the preparation process.
Those are great. And, bringing it back to fear and being scared, I had taken a course at some point, and the individual who was leading that was around business. And he had made the statement that fear is a human condition. It is something we all have. If you don't have it, there might actually be something wrong and you need to see a doctor.
Mhm.
So, the process of working through these things that are scary isn't about necessarily getting rid of the fear. It's learning how to move forward while carrying it with you. And the things that you had recommended help to minimize that feeling, but we're going to have some of that fear. We all have and carry some of that fear with us no matter what we do. So even the
Mhm.
bravest people that you see are carrying some amount of fear. They've just learned those techniques to make it a little bit smaller and easier to carry versus it being the big screaming thing in your face that's stopping you from moving
Yes.
forward. No,
Yeah.
I it's a good.
Yeah, I think, fear, because it's not beneficial to the process, For some people, fear becomes a crippling aspect. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a quote unquote healthy amount of fear that becomes managed. And so that's why we move those things out of the way. Taking your child to kindergarten is a fear. It is the unknown. And it's for both people, the mom, the dad, the child, everybody involved. There's that fear and it comes with the unknown. But it is, I'm going to take this step and see how this goes. And oftentimes people come back and they say, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah, and getting more information helps to
Yeah.
reduce that unknown piece. So by doing something that is relatively low risk, even when you're bringing your children to kindergarten, they always have the information
Yes.
sessions and they have the come meet the teacher day. And all of that is that same concept of gaining more information to reduce the fear, to make it more known. So the unknown isn't as big and isn't as scary. And this concept can be applied anywhere.
Mhm.
And that's where you can go and do some more research or go check out a
Yes.
place or meet somebody that works for a company you want to work for or whatever the case may be so that you have more information so that that fear monster, so to speak, gets a little bit smaller for you.
Absolutely. That's what my own terminology that I've come up with. As a child, I loved Curious George, and I still find myself kind of being a Curious George. And I encourage people to just become a Curious George. Inquire, like you had mentioned, if there's a company that you want to work for, jump on some of these outlets that allows you to meet people within that organization. Now, there's the benefit of social media. Get to know some people who are a part of those organizations that you can say, hey, I am interested in knowing more. Can you share with me your experiences, no matter what it is, even if it's not going into a new career, but experiencing anything new? Hey, I'm thinking about opening a bakery. Go to a bakery, talk to the owner, talk to the baker, talk to all of the different people that you can talk to find out what their experiences have been. And that will also help mitigate some of the fears that you have. It also will open you up to opportunities to consider things that never crossed your mind before about it.
Yeah. And I think the point of meeting those people in person or doing a Zoom call, and I know you said social media, but I know you meant like connecting with them and
Oh, yeah.
asking questions. But back to kind of scrolling way back to the beginning of the conversation is don't spend your time looking at the like Instagram account of somebody and thinking that's the
No.
full picture. It's the actual conversation and how much even 5 minutes can bring you over just some pictures or things like that too. And so just thinking about that when you're doing your research of like who are you talking to, where are you getting the information from, and
Hmm.
making sure you're getting a holistic picture of whatever it is that you're doing your research on or looking to learn more about. But usually the
Yeah.
talking to somebody is one of the best options.
Oh, yeah. Now, when I say social media, I'm talking all of the outlets. Those are some of the things that will draw you in, that will facilitate those conversations. And even in the preparation, this is something that I started doing many years ago, and I encourage other women to do it as well. Kind of run your life like a business. So I have an executive board, I have an advisory board, I have investors, and then I have what I consider fan club members. And so let me tell you a little bit about that. So my executive board, those are the people in my life that will just they are so on it that they're going to give it to me straight. There is no sugar involved because they want to make sure that the outcome really aligns with the goal. And those are the people that sometimes it's hard to embrace what they're sharing, but they have such an experience and they have such a reputation that is well respected that I say, okay, I'm open to receive what it is that you're offering. So that's your executive board of your life. Then there is the advisory board. The advisory board, I consider that group of people kind of middle of the road, and that's not a bad thing. They are looking at the goals that you're setting and they have advice to offer to you, but they may be a little more sweet with it. And they give you the warm fuzzies when they are willing to share their thoughts and help you get to where you need to get to, whatever that looks like. And then you have the investors. Those are the people who are so committed that they are just about seeing you win, 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 win. The investors are the people who are going to, as I think about it, they put their money where their mouth is. So, and not just a financial thing, but even the investment, you can call them late at night and say, "Hey, I just did XYZ. I want to get your thoughts on it." Or "I just created this. I want you to take a look at it." Or "I am opening a bakery and I've just made a lot of goodies. Can you come over or can I bring over these samples? I really want to get your opinion." Those are your investors, and it's important to have all of those people. Now, having the fan club members, we all have them. And I caution you about your fan club members because they're just that. They are here to cheer you on when everything is going great. But if you have a moment where you need to slow down, they may lose interest and they may go in a different direction. Don't be discouraged when you see your fan club fluctuate. Don't take to heart everything that your fan club says because they are only looking at the good. And oftentimes, the fan club members, they're looking to see what they can benefit from without investing anything. So be mindful of that, but have them all. Because even when you're at your low points, even if you talk to the right fan club member and you say, "I'm having a really low point today," some of them are going to say, "You may be having a low point today, but remember when you did XYZ."
Some dedicated fans, no matter what.
Absolutely. And so just think about all of those different things when you are setting up your life and you're preparing and you're ready for the pivot and you're strategizing on making a change no matter what it is. But keep in mind the purpose of each of these groups. The executive board, they will not just simply tell you yes because that's what you want to hear, but they're going to make sure that you are okay and that the outcome is in alignment.
Yeah, that's really good advice of being able to have those different groups of people and recognizing which people in your life are which so that you are leveraging the skills and the information that they're giving you in a way that's going to help you move forward.
Yes.
So, another piece that we had talked about was that you work with pretty much all women, empowering women to make those transitions in their life or do whatever it is that they want to do in their life. You work with younger women who are in their is you work with women in their 30s and then beyond. Those different groups, like you mentioned there in the beginning, that they each have their own needs or they're at different phases in their life. What do those groups each need most? And how do their needs differ?
Definitely. So when you think about the different groups, I kind of look at that fresh out of college, grad school age, like 22 to 35 age group. That's the group that I feel like needs the most clarity, confidence building, need help creating structure, also help with exposure. So the networking to really find the pathway that they want to consider going down. So that's kind of that early in career, early stages of adulthood, kind of getting that footing group. Then you've got that 35 plus group, which is a very interesting group because everything that we've learned along the way, some of those things we need to unlearn. Some of those things we really just need to push them to a side and never look at them again because it no longer serves us as it may have served in the past. Because at that point, you're starting to find that rhythm in career, finding that rhythm in life, whether that is with a mate or with children or whatever the case may be. But you're at that point where things have happened as the younger generation would say, life has been lifing. So it's at this point where healing needs to come because there's been some type of damage, if you will, that has happened along the way. This is the stage in life where redirection is necessary because, again, like we talked before, you've been in this career path for 10 years and you wake up one day and you're like, "I hate this." And so it's at that stage of redirection and trying to find purpose in everything that you do. And I say 35 plus, but again, I bring that into segments because someone who is mid 50s, early 60s, they're starting to pivot again. They're looking towards retirement. But the question becomes, what do I do? Where am I in this season of my life? How do I move to the next phase? What is my purpose at this point? And so I look at that very differently. But at the end of the day, both groups that I'm working with, they need the space to feel like they've been seen and they're being heard and they're safe to really talk about their areas of concern and to be able to get that feedback that is supportive of them in order for them to feel like, okay, yeah, I need to give consideration to that. So ultimately, I work from a perspective of empowerment and giving yourself permission, giving yourself grace, looking at opportunities from within, and just trying your hand at some things that you may have never considered before.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And the fact that there are different phases and different events that take place that still require those transition skills as far as
Yes.
figuring out what that all looks like going inside. They're very different events in those different phases. And like you said, if you have children or you don't have children, or you have whatever the case, you're going into retirement or you realize you hate your job, those are all vastly different things. But at the end of the day, it's coming home to yourself and
Mhm.
recognizing what's important to me, to those that I love, and my life. And what are the steps I need to take to kind of create that realignment? Because we do just kind of go and go and go, and all of a sudden we get misaligned and we need to come back. The tools are the same, it just may be a different topic, essentially, that
Yes,
you're working towards. So,
absolutely.
yeah, so we talked about all of your coaching piece, but I really wanted to make sure we also talked about H.A.L.O, Help a Lady Out, your nonprofit work that you do, all of it. So
Yeah.
this isn't just that, but it's really a lifeline, and the work that you do is really a lifeline for women. I'm curious to know just what inspired you to create it and what has that been like for you?
So, H.A.L.O is a program. It's the foundational program for Bridging the Gap Community Enrichment, which is something that I founded a number of years ago. I grew up in a family with both parents where giving back to the community was very important. My father being a multiple Purple Heart recipient serving in the US Army, my mother doing all of the things, she was a social worker by trade, but just kind of innate to that. And so growing up where we were always involved in various aspects, over time, I started to recognize that women aren't as empowered. And I say that because I have, or even as a child, had friends that weren't quite as empowered as I was from childhood from my parents. As I got older, I realized that people need to be encouraged. They genuinely need support. They need the help. And so I decided when something actually catastrophic happened within my family, I said, what can I do to help? How do I solidify this? And I started doing some things and friends knew what I was doing and they would donate the financial support and the resources because it really started out when I had a close family member who was diagnosed with cancer. And so it really started to take arms and legs from there because when you see these things in real time, it makes you go, how do I help? Thankfully, my family member has been able to overcome the battle of cancer, but women continue to battle in that way. And so I really have a heart and a passion for helping women. And it just kind of evolved out of that because recognizing some of the ladies in the neighborhood that I grew up in as they're getting older, their spouses may have passed away, different things like that. They needed help to just navigate the day to day things, whether it's knowing how to balance a checkbook, but trying to do these things with dignity. helping them find the resources that they need that someone else may have taken care of for them in the past. And then realizing, hey, if I can really turn this into a nonprofit organization, this allows me to help get funding in order to support these different programs and to make sure that I am also giving back into the community.
That's great. And really, at the end of the day, when we look at least within our society, women really are the caregivers. And so, what happens when those caregivers end up in a situation where they are the ones really needing the care? And
Yes.
yes, many times families will come in and they will help, but sometimes there are situations where maybe they can't or they're at a distance. So, providing something like this where it is intentionally there to support these women who have been supporters their whole life, that's just such a wonderful way to give back at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yes, it has definitely been rewarding. One of the things that it kind of started out with is creating these empowerment packs for women who are in their journey of cancer and just providing some of the niceties, if you will, putting in the blankets because if someone's going through chemo or radiation, they're super cold. Having a lady from my church who does all of the knitting and crocheting of those and putting that in there, providing just some tea bags for them to take and different things like that, just to say, hey, somebody is thinking about you and we are cheering you on through this process. And that has also been super rewarding just for them to get that care package unexpected and it brightens their day. Yeah.
That's great. I have family members who went through all of that. And so it's just a lovely thing that you provide. Thank you. And so to wrap up for today, last thought, if someone is feeling stuck or they're in a fog or they have that big fear and they're at the place of what do I do now? And they really want to begin the identifying me process. What is one message or one piece of advice that you would like to leave with them?
Start with knowing who you are, know where you are, know the destination that you want to get to. Don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to slow down. Remember what your goal is, your purpose, and know that as long as you are in a healthy space, then it's going to happen. It's a process. You are not lost. You're not off, but you have to prepare and you have to move forward with positivity and power.
Thank you again for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great. And I hope that this is beneficial to all of your listeners.
Absolutely. And yes, thank you for giving us the permission to pause and also to rise. And your work really is at a soul level and a strategy level, which I think we all need, especially now. And so, in order for folks to connect with you and learn more about Behold or Bridging the Gap Community Enrichment, they can visit your website, which is TymekaWhiteside. Or you can follow Tymeka at Your Favorite Life Coach on Instagram and at Tymeka Inspires on TikTok. So if this episode did help you breathe a little deeper, pass it on to a woman who's in the middle of her own process, help her with identifying her me, herself, and bring a little bit of clarity. So until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep building the life that actually fits you. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Everything shared here is based on personal experience, research, and lived wisdom. Nothing in this show should be taken as medical, legal, mental health, or professional advice. As always, consult with a qualified professional for your specific situation. Listening to this podcast does not make me your coach, but hey, I'm glad you're here.